Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with another tag video. This video was created by Chic here on YouTube. She did this tag and named it the palette 5000 tag because there is so many palette tags out there. She wanted to emphasize that in the name and named it palette 5000. So this palette, as you can see, is a palette themed tag. I have 10 questions to answer, so I will go through all of them. But before I do so, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So I will have Cheek Geek linked down below if you want to check her out, as well as her tag video. But let's jump into the questions. So the first question is a palette that you wore on a special occasion. And I haven't really had any palettes that I've worn on a wedding. I'm not married yet, obviously. Nothing like that, nothing massively special occasion. But I thought about a palette that I reach for when I want to go out, for example, for my birthday. I've worn this palette. Also when I have a wedding to go to, or anything that I feel like is more of a special occasion. I try to reach for my more expensive palettes, and one that I have reached for a couple times in that way is this one right here, which is my Pat McGrath Utopian Dream. It is good to know though that I rotate for my palettes, so this is not always the one that I reach for. I also thought about bringing out the Natasha Denona Bronze palette, but I feel like this one is more kind of exciting and more special occasion for me, so that's why I picked this one. But this palette looks like this. It's an absolutely stunning palette. I actually got this one for my birthday as well, so I wore it the day I got it, and then I also wore it I think my birthday the year after as well. So I worn it for 2 birthdays and again for some other special occasions. It's an absolutely stunning palette. The special shades in here, which are these 4 here, are so sparkly, so textured. I love these 2 especially. This is my favorite shade. And yeah, I love this palette a lot. You can create some really nice looks with it. It has a nice kind of mauve toned matte, a brown matte, as well as this kind of more warm tone matte if you want to go a bit more colorful. So I like this palette a lot. It is a stunning one, and I'll definitely keep reaching for it, and I'll try to not just reach for it when it's a special occasion. So the second question is a palette that you love but that is repetitive. And I'm not gonna lie, one of my favorite palettes in my collection is definitely repetitive, and that is my Natasha Denona Gold palette. This one, I have these shades over and over in my collection, but I just love this palette so much. There are a lot of browns in here. I have a lot of these kind of warm tone golds, a lot of these kind of greeny golds in my collection. So there is so much repetition across this compared to the rest of my collection. Also, a lot of shades in here look quite similar in the pan. I know on the eyes they show up different, and that's why I love this palette, because even though it has so many browns, for example, they all look different. Same with the golds. These 2 might look similar, like this one here and this one here, but the texture is completely different. So I wouldn't change any of the shades in here, although they might look repetitive upon first glancing at the palette. But I know that I have these colors all over and over again in my collection, but this is the best version of those shades. This is the palette I will keep if I had to get rid of everything else that was repetitive. This would be the one that I will keep. It would be my one neutral palette, warm neutral palette, if I had to keep just one. And I love this palette very, very much, but I mean, these colors are quite common, but this formula is not. I love this formula a lot, so this is the next palette. So next up we have a palette that you got your money's worth, and I decided to go with my Anastasia Novena palette. I almost picked the one that is coming up next, but since I'm including that in the next prompt, I decided to go with a different one. But I feel like I got my money's worth out of this palette too. You can see all of the pans in there. Obviously I haven't finished up any shades yet, but I have pans in every single shade in here apart from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what's that? I have 9 pans in here, which is very, very exciting, and I definitely feel like I've gotten my money's worth out of this palette. I definitely will keep using it though. It's one of my favorites, as you can see, and it's a really, really good one. But yeah, I will definitely classify this one as having gotten my money's worth. So the next palette that I wanted to include, I have included instead for palette that is an amazing deal, and the one that I decided to go with is the Star Wars Mandalorian palette. So this is the one that I wanted to originally pick for getting my money's worth, because you can see that I have pan on everything in shade in here apart from one, which is this one here. But the pans as well are quite big in this palette. I mean, not massive, but it's more than this pinprick pan down here. I have used the rest of the palette a bit more. So this is one that I would have included there as well, but I didn't want to double dip. So the reason why I have included this one instead for Is an Amazing Deal is because this is a Colourpop palette. I don't know how much this retails for, but they are quite affordable. And this color story is just so stunning. I just love the tones in here. They are so unique and you can create the most beautiful cool tone green looks. And I don't often go for cool tone greens. I prefer like warm tone greens, murky greens, like both like, you know, more olive greens as well as like acid, like almost yellowy greens. I love those colors, but the cool tone greens have not always been my favorite. But since getting this palette, it's just something about these undertones that they work so well. You also have these slightly warmer tones in with the palette, so you can create more of a neutral look, and they actually work quite nicely with the greens as well. So I absolutely love this palette, and for the price especially, like this color story is just top notch. So that's why I'm saying this is a great value, because it is quite affordable. But what I would 100% buy this at a more expensive price. I think it's absolutely 100% worth the money. And for being so affordable, you're getting quite a unique color story. So next up we have Quad that you love and wish was larger. So I actually only have one quad in my collection. Oh well, I actually have two, but one is one that I'm thinking about decluttering, so I don't necessarily count it into my collection. So the one and only quad that I could really pick is the Rowdy Quad, and this is the 75 degrees quad. This palette I recently acquired into my collection, and it is a stunning palette. I wouldn't necessarily say I absolutely love this palette. I like it. I recently did no plan left behind on this palette, and I do like it. But I mean, the reason why I chose this is mainly because it's the only quad that I could choose. But if I didn't love it, I probably would have chosen a different palette. But I do like this palette, and I feel like I would love if this was more extended, because the formula in here is quite unique. But I would also like to have maybe a couple mattes with it to create like more of a neutral tone palette, and not just have this as a topper palette, because right now I don't really create full looks with this palette. I use it like almost like one shade at a time, sometimes two, but because of that I feel like it would be really nice if this one was extended into like maybe like even a 6-pan palette or larger, with maybe like an inner corner shade and also mainly matte, maybe having like a transition shade and a deeper matte, maybe a third like mid-tone matte as well. If I had that with this, that would be amazing. So that is why I chosen the Rowdy Quad. So moving on, we have a palette that you love but hate the packaging of, and this is also another new palette in my collection. I actually used this one yesterday. I did a video yesterday, I think it went up 2 days ago, but I used this one in a Get Ready With Me, and the palette itself is like, it's a nice palette. I used, like I said, for the first time, so it's not like I've fallen in love with it over a long period of time, but I really did love it for the first use. But the reason why I hate the packaging, first of all, the palette is the Stone Vibes palette from Urban Decay. The reason why I hate the packaging is because of this raised, like, you can see the raised plastic there. I don't know, yeah, can you pick it up? This like raised plastic. That means that it gets so hard to store. It can scratch my other palettes. It's like a quite, yeah, it's not like sharp or anything, but they have some sharp edges. So I feel like it would not be good to store with other palettes, because again, you could just like damage my other palettes. And also it's not flat. Like right now when I put my pile of palettes next to me, I couldn't stack this on top of the rest of the palettes because I couldn't stack anything on top of this. So I had to put it on the side. Things like that. I don't like the packaging. Also, I know a lot of people think this like packaging looks really nice and expensive, and I feel like on camera it does. However, in person, it definitely looks a little bit cheaper than it might look in like on camera. But it is, I mean, the idea of the packaging is really nice, especially because it goes with the vibes of the palette. Like it goes with the stone vibes, it goes with the like gemstone kind of vibe. But yeah, I like the palette a lot, at least first impression. I used most of the shades apart from I think 3. But yeah, the packaging is not my favorite, so that is why I chose this one. So next up we have Show Your Dream palette with singles. So I created my own perfect palette using my singles, and I put them in here. So this palette is it's actually a 13-pan palette, but it's like a 12-pan inspired palette. So this is the palette right here. This is my dream palette. So I absolutely love how this came out. Might actually keep my shadows in here because I feel like they're so stunning. So I decided to go with 5 clear eyeshadows on top. I picked 5 because they can fit 5. That's why it's a 13 pan instead of a 12 pan. So I have 5 clear eyeshadows. I have 1 iridescent and then 4 more normal shimmers. Then I have 4 more shadows right here. I think we have 1 pastel roses and then 3 terra moons. And then at the bottom we have 4 mattes. And the reason why I wanted to create this palette was because, like, why it's my perfect dream palette is because there's a lot of special shimmers that are kind of neutral adjacent. There are a couple more kind of slightly colorful shades, like there's some twists to it. Like you can see here, there's like greeny gold. Same with this one, it's like a greeny gold. We have like a purple shade. This one has like a burgundy undertone. It shifts into like a bright green. This one here is like slightly pink leaning with a gold shift. And then this one here, which looks white, has a green to purple shift, which is why I also think it would work with the palette, because I have some more purple leaning shades as well as like some more green gold leaning shades. Then for the second row, like again, we have that green gold shade. We have this one, which is like a pink burgundy to green gold shift. Absolutely stunning. This one here is not very shifty, but it's very, very metallic. It's like like a champagne kind of cool tone gold. And then this one here is one of my favorite shades. It's like a purpley pink. It's like a really unique base, purpley pink base that has purple and green shift to it. So a lot of kind of neutral adjacent shades. And then we have my perfect mattes. We have more of a warm tone transition, a more neutral transition, a more mauve tone transition, and then a deepening up shade, which I feel like would go with all of the other shades. So let me swatch out this palette quickly just to show you what it would look like. So there we have the swatches. You probably won't be able to pick up the shifts on camera, but from the top here we have Clear Royalty, we have Bloodline, Blaze, Corrosion, and Phosphorescent. Then up here we have Terra Moon's Starburst, Terra Moon's Palladium, I think. Then we have Antares from Terra Moons as well. And then on the bottom we have Starlight from the Pastel Roses. And then from the mattes, they're all from Sydney Grace. We have Haystack, Camel, I think Honesty, is that what it is? Let me double check. No, sorry, Picking Peaches. And the dark brown is Chocolate Raspberry Fudge. So that is my dream palette if I had to create a dream palette with singles. So for question number 8, we have the question, palettes that you would like to combine together. And this one was probably the hardest one to choose for me because there's not really any palettes before that I thought that I would pair together. Actually, another combination that I just thought of is the Kaleidos Club Nebula and the Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels palette. I've always said that they are like sister palettes, like they're kind of like very similar color stories, but one is like slightly brighter and one is slightly muted. But what I ultimately decided to go with was these 2 palettes right here, which is the Subculture palette and the Wilderness palette from Beauty Base. So the Wilderness palette looks like this, and this is more of a vibrant color story, like it has like a lot of blue, green, like yellow and red tones. So let me show that next to Subculture. So Subculture also has those kind of tones. It has those green tones, those like more blue leaning tones, a few peachy kind of yellowy tones as well. So there is a lot of like overlap in the color story, but this one is like I said, brighter. It's more leaning on the blues and greens, and this one is slightly like more muted, more grungy, and it does have a few more neutral shades in it. So I feel like these 2 would pair beautifully together. I feel like this one could be a nice deepening up palette to this one. I also feel like you would have more shimmers in here, which would go with the mattes in this palette. And also this Subculture palette will bring a little bit more neutrality to this palette because it doesn't really have any neutral shades in it, apart from maybe this brown down here, which is still, it's still not the most neutral brown. It's quite a warm tone brown. So that's why I decided to pick these 2 palettes, and I feel like they would play really nicely together and complement each other really well. So we have 2 more palettes to go. Next up we have a large palette that you wish was smaller. So this is like the opposite of the quad question before. And this palette that I decided to go with is actually another Beauty Bay palette, and that is the Love Nose palette. I absolutely love this palette. I love the color story in here. I love the tones, but it is a little bit repetitive. So like you can see, we have like this purple and this purple, like they're very similar tones. This one is slightly lighter, but I don't think you would need both. We have like a lot of these kind of pinky shades, like this one, which I think also is overlapping. And then most of everything, we have a lot of these really light pastel shades. And I feel like on the eyes, these pastel shades won't show up that different. I feel like having maybe like this more warm tone and this more kind of pinky tone would have been enough. But then we also have like this, like I said, this lilac kind of shade. And we also have like this one, which I feel like these two, we don't need both. And there's also a lot of repetition here. I feel like you could have probably cut out at least a fourth of this palette. Like this whole top row could have been gone and we could have concised it down to, what's that, a 15-pound palette. So yeah, I think it is repetitive, but I love this color story. But if I had to choose one that I wish was a little bit smaller, I would pick my Love Nose palette. Then the last question that we have is an eyeshadow palette that you wish had a matching face palette. And I haven't really gotten into face palette until very recently. But the palette that I chose that I wish had a matching face palette is actually my Kaleidos Sashimi City palette. So the reason why I picked this one, let me try to open it. There we go. So the reason why I picked this palette is because, it looks like this by the way, it is a perfect kind of neutral everyday palette for me. It's quite concise. You have all the masks you need. Even like, I feel like these browns are even a bit repetitive, especially for £6, but I'm fine with that. There's definitely a little bit of a difference in them. But yeah, you have everything you need here for an everyday look. You have like a warmer tone transition, more of a peachy tone transition. You have a golden kind of sparkly shimmer. This one here goes from like a gold to more of a silvery sparkle, and this one here goes from like a pink, you can see there, to like a gold sparkle, which I don't think you can pick up. But like you have the two geochromes that I love. And then you also have like all the basics, and this is also quite a muted palette. It's nothing too colorful, so that's why I wish this one had a matching face palette. I feel like you could have like more kind of muted, like more like almost like a peach blush like this, like a bronzer which would complement the browns, and then like a really pretty highlighter, especially if it was more of like a duochrome, but more of a subtle duochrome like these shades are. Like they're duochromes, but they're more wearable duochrome shades, if that makes sense. So having something like that would be amazing. Yeah, so that's kind of why I chose this one, to have a matching face palette. And that, you guys, is it for this tag video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check out Chic Geek, again linked down below, and everyone else who has been doing this tag. I don't know if you should create a playlist or not, otherwise you can use search for this tag here on YouTube. But yeah, I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye guys.